Hello friends, I am back today with a video that I'm very excited about. I had this idea a while back, like for a couple weeks, and I just haven't been able to put it all together and sit down and film, so I have it now, and I'm excited to talk about it. I know for me, my Disney phone interview is in less than a week now. I'm so nervous, but really excited. And then for all the new people, their interviews come up at the end of the month, so in like 2 to 3 weeks, so I thought I would come up with a video, and this is my top 10 Disney international programs interview tips. Obviously, this passes over to Disney College program as well for the most part, so if you're a DCP person and you found this, don't worry, you can use this too. These are just things that I came up with during my interview process last year. I am an alumni. I worked there last summer as a attractions cast member. And I've been watching a lot of videos of people to prepare myself for my interview next week, so I thought I would come up with one of my own. Also, I will have it linked up in the cards. I think they're up here. One of my roommates from last summer, Kate, blatantly stole this idea from me. Just kidding, she credited me, so it's fine. But Kate was also an attractions cast member. She did this video as well. I will link her video up there. Check that out. I only stole one of her tips, so the rest of them are totally original, but I fully admit to stealing one of them. It's fine. First tip is going to be the one I stole from Kate, and that is make yourself noticeable, I guess, in the presentation. For us, the in-person interviews, you go to a presentation that everyone has to go to first. They go over like trivia questions. For us, they ask like, what's the highest point in Walt Disney World? I think it's Everest, I don't know. Magic Kingdom's opening date, the names of all the parks, things like that. Our trick question was how many bricks are on Cinderella Castle. They ask you this, you're welcome. The answer is 0. There's no bricks on that castle, so. Do you have any interview tips, buddy? No? Okay. Bring a notepad, take notes, sit in the front, make yourself, I don't know, the most noticeable words. I don't know how to word this, but make it so the interview notices you. For us, the interviewers, obviously the ones doing the presentation, so if you ask questions, you take notes, then they know that you're serious about the program. They talk about like visa fees, visa application deadlines, housing fees, housing situations. I think taking notes on things like that really shows them that you actually are invested in the program. Number 2 is, I don't know, they kind of contradict with my later ones, but don't stress the Disney aspect of it. If you're applying for this program, especially if you're like West Coast Canada like me, or if you're from a school that doesn't really push the Disney College program, they already know that you care about Disney. That's how you came upon the program. That's how you found them. I feel like there's more people applying for Disney programs that care about Disney than people that are actually doing it to like further their careers. Disney already knows that you're a huge Disney fan. You don't have to worry about that. I think the interviews that I see where people don't do really well, or I've talked to people who don't get the jobs, they go on and on about how, you know, they love Disney and they're such a big Disney fan and they love all the movies and they love all the characters, but they don't show what they have to bring to the table and why they're interested in working for the company and working for like the specific roles they wanted. I hope that makes sense. My next tip is no Disney look. I'll actually link the PDF down below for you to take a look at. But Disney look is essentially Disney's like dress code outside of the costume that you're wearing for a specific role. So if you're someone that knows you have things that don't fall into Disney look, take that little time before your interview to correct those things. So like for me, I was asked about a tattoo. I do have a tattoo on my leg. She asked me like the location, the size. Like I said before, I ended up getting put in a role where it wasn't covered anyways, but that's fine. But say you have like a big arm tattoo, like Kate has a shoulder piece, wear a sleeve so it's covered. For me, I have my septum, I flip my septum up, I have my ear stretch, I just put in like regular looking earrings so you can't tell my ears are stretched. If you have like pink hair or purple hair or something like that, dye your hair to a natural color because they're going to make you do that for the job. I also think for the international programs, the reason they have that in-person interview, a lot of it is just seeing if you fit Disney look, because obviously if you have a half-shaved head or like facial tattoos, it's not something that you can necessarily fix in the next 3 months before you start working, you know? My next one is know your top 3 and know them well. For us, I think my top 3 was weird. I think my top 3 was actually attractions, merchandise, and then like housekeeping. But when we did our presentation, they told us there was no housekeeping, no custodial. We don't have the option to do like vacation planner or photo pass, anything like that. So everyone kind of had to adjust. We essentially were stuck between quick service, cedar, merchandise, and attractions. Those were like the only jobs available. There was only one performing position that was really, really tall, and then there was no attending positions for first times. So I'd say probably prepare like a top 5 and then know your top 3 really, really well. So that way if you do have to shuffle, at least 1 or 2 of those will still be in your top 3. Seriously? We're really doing this? I think related to that, it's also important to know why these are your top 3. So don't just go into it saying, I want attractions because I want attractions. I think almost everyone has attractions in their top 3, if not their number 1 choice. And I think people don't really know what it encompasses and don't really know how to speak to it. Knowing things like if you're looking at attractions, I love like a lot of guest direct communication. That's a lot of attractions. I'm very organized, I'm comfortable talking in front of a group, I've worked in safety critical positions before, things like that that aren't just like, I want to work at attraction because I want to work at a ride at Disney are really important because they look for things like people who are good in difficult situations, who people know how to problem solve, things like that. That's what they're actually looking for, not just someone who like loves Spaceship Earth, you know? Related to that, my next one is to watch interview questions more specific to your role. So your questions are going to vary a lot depending on what role you're going for. If you're going for attractions, like I said, they might ask you, are you comfortable memorizing spiels? Are you comfortable talking in front of a group? If you're doing character attend, they'll ask you situational questions like, what would you do if Mickey needed to leave the line, or what would you do if a family asked this? If you were asked food questions, like what do you do to ensure a safe environment if you worked in food situations in the past? Things like that. There's tons and tons of people who have their DCP phone interviews, like literally them filming their phone interviews up on YouTube. If you can find someone who got accepted in a role that you're looking for, definitely listen to it. They go through all the questions and it kind of gives you an idea of what role the interviewer is leading towards, depending on what questions they ask. So look up questions specific to the roles that you're interested in. Also, be prepared for questions that you don't expect. I think a lot of people know they're going to ask about roles, they're going to ask about why you chose this program, why you wanted to work for Disney, things like that. But a lot of the questions are actually not necessarily about the job, I found. So almost everyone gets asked about roommates. If you've had past roommates, if you've lived with people before, how that went, if you've had conflict with roommates, how you resolve that. I think straight up, a lot of the reason that people get termed, self-term, things like that, have issues in their college program is because of roommates, not necessarily because of the job. So Disney does ask about that because they're kind of trying to cover their butt because they don't want people coming and leaving because of like stupid little petty things like roommates. Almost everyone they ask if you're comfortable working indoor and outdoor because there are so many positions. Things like, have you worked in the heat before? Are you used to different weather conditions? Especially being Canadian, I feel like they're like, can you handle the heat? And I was like, yeah, totally. And then in my mind, I was like, absolutely not. And then I got put in a role that was 100% outdoors all the time, and I survived. But asking that, again, tattoos, piercings, things like that. So questions that you don't necessarily think about right away when you think of a job, be ready for those. Know the company's values and know what Disney stands for. Like I said before, everyone wants to work for Disney just because they want to work for Disney and they love Disney. But I think showing that you put thought into the company and the roles really shows that you care. So for me, I came from working for Sephora, and Sephora had the values, that's what they called them. And there was like a list of things that people would essentially get like nominated for and you could win prizes for, and it was what they strive to live every day, where Disney has the 4 keys. So before my interview, I looked up the 4 keys, I knew what they were, and I knew how they aligned with my previous work experience. And then when they asked me, why are you interested in working for Disney as a company, I said something like, you know, I really appreciate the values that this company strives for. I love that they have like these set pillars that they build everything on. And working at Sephora for years and years and years, it worked in a similar kind of setup and it worked really well. And I love being able to work with a team based off of those. And I think knowing the 4 keys, knowing the values of the company, knowing what the company was about really kind of helped. I hope that makes sense. Little things like that just show that you did look into the company and you did look into the program before you interviewed, and you aren't just like showing up on a whim, you know? I just realized you can't even see that I'm wearing my cute alumni shirt, so it just looks like I'm wearing a gray t-shirt this whole video, so that's great. Know your resume inside and out. They will have it in front of them, they will ask you questions, they will know. So for me, while it wasn't on my resume, I wrote in my cover letter that I had done previous exchange programs. They asked me about that. I had been to Costa Rica on a trip that I was I don't want to say like chosen, but it was like an advanced placement course. So we talked about that. We talked about the heat. That was on my resume. If you wrote in your resume, like, I've worked in safety critical positions, I have theater experience, so I'm looking at performing and attending, and I'm comfortable working in front of people and like memorizing things, they'll ask about that more than even just like your work experience, sometimes depending on the interviewer. Don't focus on the negative and don't bring up the negative. I feel like I watched some unsuccessful, I guess, DCP phone interviews, and it was people who really didn't know how to spin things to be more positive. So if they ask about, like, say you have no interest in merchandise, you have no merchandise experience, you hate selling, you feel pushy, you don't want to deal with people head on, things like that, and they ask you like, oh, I saw that you put like low interest or no interest in merchandise, is there a reason? Instead of just saying like, I don't want to work merchandise, or I don't like selling to people, you could go more along the lines of, I personally don't have any experience in that, I feel like I'm better suited for other roles. If you have experience somewhere else, saying something like, you know, I've been working at a restaurant as a hostess for years and I feel like I would excel working in a role more like theater or quick service. They will always ask. I feel like in everyone's interview they ask, again, like, what was a conflict with a roommate, what was a conflict with a guest, and how did you solve it? So those are always hard because you're essentially being forced to bring up negative situations. But being able to spin that, and instead of being like, yeah, this guest was being really rude to me, it was a really hard time, I had a terrible day, I think being like empathetic of the situation and focusing on how you dealt with it is better. So if a guest was really rude to you, instead of focusing on them being rude, you could say like, it was the end of the day, it was really hot out, clearly everyone was having a really long day, this guest couldn't find what they were looking for and they were upset about it. I just talked to them, calmed them down. Usually it's something more of like an overarching problem than the little thing they're dealing with, but we solved that problem and I left them in, you know, the best mood they possibly could be in. Focusing on something like that instead of being like, yeah, the guest was terrible, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that sign your paycheck. I think a lot of people focus on like, I don't want quick service, I don't want merch. They harp on negative guest experiences. They ask you about roommates, like, maybe don't tell them a story about like your actual terrible roommate, because like I wouldn't. I would go with something like more low-key about like, oh, you know, maybe someone didn't do the dishes, but then we dealt with this to get over it. Don't focus on the negative. The more negative you are, not only does it portray that you're a slightly negative person, but I also think it gets you in a mood. So the more you talk about things that are not great, and the more you talk about things that obviously upset you in the time, I feel like it brings you down. You don't want to be in that mood for your interview. No. And the last one, finally, is knowing your interviewer and thanking your interviewer and then asking questions. I knew my interviewer was Sue. I didn't know this until I got there, but she obviously introduced herself in the presentation for us, so I knew a little bit about her previous experience with the company. So knowing their name, thanking them for their time, for coming out here, if they traveled, for, you know, taking that break. And then asking something about them. Everyone says in their interview, but people love to talk about themselves. Why do you think I have an entire YouTube channel? Because I love talking about myself. Asking them something like, what's their best moment as a Disney cast member, how they got involved in the company. A lot of people, if you're a college program student, if you ask them how they got involved, their experience with the company, a lot of them started on college programs, so that immediately gives you something to kind of connect over. If you ask them like, what's their favorite thing about this park, what's the best location they've worked at, things like that, it also can open up opportunities to say like, oh my gosh, yes, I do love Hollywood Studios, I would love to work in Hollywood Studios. My favorite ride is also, I don't even know what's in Hollywood Studios besides Tower of Terror, but like my favorite ride is also that. Like, that'd be such a cool experience. Saying things like that can kind of like weasel your way into saying your preferences, you know? Just be calm, relax, it'll be fine. Kate said this in her video, but I feel like in experience looking at it, more people get cut before the interviews than after. So if you think about it that way, you're already literally over halfway there. Yes, people do get cut afterwards. Yes, people are waitlisted. It happens, but there's never like a true end to your Disney like program, I guess. For Americans, you can do another college program if you're still in school. You can do summer alumni if you've done one before. You can just go work for the company. That's not an option that we get as Canadians, unfortunately. You can do that as Americans. Canadians, if you're still in school, you can apply for more cultural exchange programs. If you have graduated, if you're not in school, there's a cultural rep program working in Epcot. There's always more things you can do. You can work for Disney Store. You can do remote services. There's always more you can do. So if you feel like you messed up your interview, don't worry. It'll be okay. And if you haven't had your interview yet, just breathe. It'll be fine. I remember being stressed. I literally have videos of me on the day of my interview, like, in like a tight dress, sweating. I was there so early. I was literally the first person there when I ran into the interviewers because they were still setting up the room. That's how early I was. I was the first person, and then my roommate Steph was the second person. So clearly we were meant to be. Yeah, if you have any other questions, specific questions, like I said, I did attractions. If you have attractions interview questions, totally let me know. Leave them in the comments down below. I do have a video that like I've plugged everywhere where I talk about every single question that was asked in my interview. My cat's gonna rub her face on the camera in a minute and knock it over. I do have a video where I talk about every single interview question that I was personally asked last year for my summer 2018 interview. I'll link that as well. Like I said, if you have any questions, any concerns, anything, hit me up in the comments. If you see this on a Facebook post, ask on the Facebook post. Find me on Instagram. I'm LowDadsDisney. I'm there all the time. I'll answer DMs about anything. A few people have already DM me, asked me questions. Happy to help. Yeah, all my other links to everything else are always down below. And I'm sorry this is so long. I will see you guys very soon. Bye.